Hey everyone, Gerard Scarpese here for next in a series of professionals who practice. It's a partnership with our friends at Pivot Point. Today I'm working on the Erica mannequin, and as a special treat, we've had Erica permed. This is a beautiful mannequin, beautiful texture to do different types of cuts and styles on. We want to work with a bit more curly hair and even permed hair because, to be quite honest, I think we're definitely starting to see a little bit of some movement there. We probably haven't seen a lot of perms in a very long time, but if you've been hairdressing as long as I have, you can remember when perms were incredibly popular, and I think there's some action coming back, and a great way to get in on that action is to practice first on your mannequins. This particular Erica mannequin was permed by Shraddha from Tony and Guy. She did a beautiful job. Kelly's going to put in the information of what kind of solution she used and the size of the perm rods. And perhaps in the future we'll feature her on a live sharing her perming techniques because this is really beautiful. Okay, now back into the haircut. So working with curl or permed hair and doing it the way that I'm doing it, which is going to be technically, you really have to think about first how you're going to apply even tension, which is what I'm doing. Obviously I could cut this dry and freehand and free form. That's one way of doing it. But you can also cut curly hair very technically and get beautiful shapes out of it. The thing is to be able to read that curl, see how much it's going to shrink or expand. So you notice I started right here in the front. I'm going to lay in a bob line and I'm going to continually elevate that to create a beautiful inside out graduation, one of my favorite shapes for curl. One of the reasons why I like to start right on the front is because this is typically the area that's going to shrink the most, it's going to jump up the most, and if I can get the length right here, I can balance everything off that for curl. So using tension, what I did was I came in and I cut this a few times to see how much it would shrink up to get right to the length that I wanted. And then of course I have to anticipate how much more shrinkage there'll be when it dries. And I think by the time this is dried and all shaped through, we'll sit right below the jawline. Yeah, more or less. And then I'll do my free form cutting when the hair is dry. All right, so moving on. First section was parallel to the front hairline. Next section goes a little bit more vertical and upright. So I'm sectioning in one direction and then holding and elevating in another direction, which gives a really kind of seamless feel to this. Normally we cut exactly parallel to our section, but as we start to get a little bit more advanced in hair cutting, there's some great things we can do where we section in one direction and then hold and cut in another direction. And that's what I'm doing here. Fingers are basically square to start off with here. And then from there, I'm going to keep rotating to build this shape. Using the fine side of a YS Park 338 comb. I like this comb because it's got a stronger spine, which is great for curly and thick hair, so that I feel like really in control of it and I can really get an even tension from roots to ends, right into the fingers, nice even tension. You'll notice I kind of rotate my fingers a little bit, and what that does is gives me kind of the build up that we're going to be going for here in the graduated shape. So it's again a little bit of a kind of little trick there. So you can see the angle, cutting square in my fingers using over direction, getting a slight longer effect towards the front. Sections more and more vertical. Kelly, can you see how simple that section is? Using a lighter comb, since the hair is already, obviously it's been permed, we don't want to disturb that curl. Even though this was permed a few days ago, I think the curl's really set in well. If you were cutting it in the salon right after perming, you'd want to be gentle with it. You can also cut before perming and then do your refining after the perm when the hair is dried and styled. It's really up to, I'll be honest, as someone who's been doing hair since the early 90s when we were doing perms, it has to do with booking times and all that. So it can be, especially if it's more than one person doing the hair. So very often we always kind of ended up cutting perms afterwards so that they wouldn't have to be rinsed and washed and then permed and then washed again. It was just kind of the more efficient way of doing it, but obviously there's a lot of different elements. So you can see the graduation from the tension and the slight bit of elevation You know, tensions obviously on hair that's got spring, not only is it going to make that hair spring up a little bit shorter, and in this case I don't think it's too much. It's, you know, you have to judge every head of hair. And this one, I don't see a huge amount of spring here. Obviously from wet to dry it'll shrink a little bit, but there's some hair when it's wet and you're cutting it, you can cut it in your fingers, and the second you let go of it, you know. But again, it's a very case-by-case basis. And that's the beauty of hair cutting, kind of analyzing it, looking at it, playing with that hair to see exactly how it's going to live. A little bit of freehand here on any little pieces where maybe the curls are looser. One last section on this side, totally vertical section to the back of the ear. And again, rotating that hair. So maybe a little bit too much in my hand, so I'm just going to get the top out of the way for this one. And coming around, picking up that original square line, and it's starting to build this graduation for me. I'd like to give shout outs to anyone that's watching. Cal, if you want to take a minute to say hello to some of our friends.
Yes, tons of people from all over the world are watching. I saw India and of course all over from the States. Whitney was wondering, she may have missed it, what is the diagonal back parting you're going to do? Thank you.
Yeah, that's already been done. So these sections were like this. 1, 2, 3. I started cutting at a low elevation, and then with each section I kind of pivoted from the knuckle to lift more and more. I'm going to do that same exact thing on the opposite side. So you see what it does? It creates this, it's more and more graduated from the line to the time I'm about here. And it creates this beautiful, I guess the best way I can describe it is like a bustle. And the beauty of doing it from the front is, well, it's so visual. You see everything right away, especially with curl like this. You know, because you could work very hard in the back for a while and then come around to the front and maybe misjudge the curl and lose this beautiful angle. It's just something I've done for years when working with curled or permed hair, when I want a kind of a more dramatic effect at the front. Okay, so you can see what I mean by, you know, I already know what length it's going to be, but this is what I was doing before you guys tuned in. I just want to see how much this hair is going to shrink up or jump up. So I'm using the fine teeth of the comb, and even down here, so I can see where the length is. It's all the way down here, right? So if I come through and I just cut a little bit off, and this is what I would do. I would cut a little bit off. I can see where it is wet in my fingers. Now how much spring do we have there? We've got about 1 inch of spring. I'd say at the most about 1 inch. Obviously the alternative is to cut it with no tension, and you can do that either damp or dry. Obviously a very popular way of cutting curly hair. But I find, you know, I don't find one better than the other. I like to do everything, and I'll cut curls dry, I'll cut them wet. But I felt like here, for me, it would be a better lesson. Coming in, I want to judge exactly where that length was here. You can see where my fingers are. Now I want to match that up on this side. You can see the first section parallel to the hairline, but my fingers are not parallel to the hairline. They're down in here. Cutting a square line with nice even tension. I can stop and check to make sure it's balanced with the other side, because of course that's very important. We always want to check balance. You know, and what's nice about the pivot point mannequins, and this one here is the Erica, is that you've got, you know, very accurate, balanced facial features. You've got an even amount of density throughout, because sometimes it can be very difficult to get a good lesson off a not a good mannequin. I can tell you that. And you know, a great lesson is what it's all about. Okay, feeling pretty balanced to me. We'll keep checking as we go. This is where a little bit of the over direction away from the hairline, but also a tiny bit of rotation at the very front. Over directing away, finger angles basically square, a little bit of elevation. And again, we'll check where the hair is going to be worn. Balance feels good there. Feels good at the back. Okay, now if you missed it on the other side, you're going to get to see how that graduation is created. At this point, it's quite subtle. This is the least graduated part of the haircut. It's going to get more dramatic as we move on. Next section becomes a little bit more vertical. You're going to keep that hair manageable using some of Goldwell's Curl and Wave Hydrating Serum Spray. Just lightly misting that throughout, and of course keeping it consistently damp, because we don't want the curl to be at one level on one side and another level on the other. Okay, head is slightly tilted away from me. Now, I comb down almost exactly the same. I want everything to be the same until the last second, and then I'm going to pivot from my fingertips and start to bring the knuckles, in this case, a little bit higher. Starting to build that graduation. So going from the line into the graduation. We'll turn around this way, Cal. I think maybe we'll get a better shot. So you can see where we are in the head. Over directing away slightly. And again, gently. Each time I'm going, if the comb was the section, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, then we'll carry that around to the back. After we complete the outline in the back, which will make for a really beautiful, one of my all-time favorite shapes, especially for naturally curly hair, type 3, type 4 hair, hair that's been permed, where you want a dramatic shape. I mean, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you just want it organic. And I completely love that as well. But sometimes you like that geometric, very visible, three-dimensional shape, even on curly hair. It can be quite beautiful. So here you can see, extending that angle. You know, this falls into the family of a graduation or a round graduation. It can be done shorter, it can be done longer, it can be done with several different angles. Excuse me. Judging that shrinkage here, maybe I can do just a little. You don't want to do too much of this at this point. I do anticipate by the time this is all done and dry, it's sitting much closer to the chin. Because from wet to dry, I think this is going to shrink about 1 inch. That's my approximation. A little bit more vertical. You know, again, I realize many of us maybe haven't. Some of you guys probably haven't ever done perms, you know. But it is a beautiful art. And the one thing I can tell you about hairdressing is things definitely come back into, you know. I can remember when people were doing hair painting, mostly in the 70s and 80s, and you know, then foil came out and everyone was like, oh my God, you have to always do foil. And now we're back to hair painting. So things come and go. There's always innovations. I think the great thing about, you know, and you can see it here, look how beautiful that curl is that the solutions that people use have continued to improve. Again, almost totally vertical at this point at the back of the ear. Even tension from roots to ends. And again, working my way through. I think I might have dropped out a small piece at the bottom here. We can blend that in. Lower this down a little bit to continue the graduation. I don't want to round off any corners quite yet. And to be quite honest, on curly and permed hair, the corners can actually be kind of cool to work with when the hair is dry, to pick up and do kind of free-form stuff. So here we should be able to, if I drop down the opposite side, using lighter clips. These are, normally we use these are sold at Hairbring, we call them NBAA clips, that's the name. They're not as tough, you know, they're lighter so they won't stretch the hair. So we're starting to see the shape here from the front. Now coming into the back, second part of the shape, we want to make sure that hair is consistently damp and easy to manage. So first thing I'm going to do is use some of my Curl and Wave hydrating serum spray from our friends at Goldwell. Make sure that this is evenly saturated, easy to work with. And then of course, making sure it's evenly damp. You know, since it's been sitting a while, I'll use a wide tooth comb. This is one of our YS Park wide tooth combs. We want to make sure we can comb through here nice and even. We want to make sure we've got good, even dampness. Little mini water sprayer. Because, you know, if one area is really dry, one area is really wet, we're not going to be able to read elasticity and spring, which are a big deal. Okay, now coming into the back, we have to create the outline in the back. So I'm not going to just jump right into the graduation in the back, not in a vertical sense yet. I'm actually going to come in here and I'm going to take another section on a horizontal diagonal Now again, this can be an area that's really tough to deal with on anyone's head of hair, and it can be very difficult to deal with on curly hair. So this may be an area where I cut a little more freeform. If there's calyx, if there's different things jumping, this might be an area on any bulb you might tend to cut this freehand. And then as I go on, I can continue. So my idea is I'm looking at a rounded line that drops in there. I'm going to see how much that shrinks. And again, you have to kind of anticipate hairlines can shrink more than other parts of the hair. You know, not always, but very often because you've got calyx and things like that. So giving myself a little room for that to shrink. Working with my new HB Pro AG, beautiful new shear that we just had made in Japan with a master scissor manufacturer, Takahashi-san, former Hikari scissor master, started an independent company, and we've been working with him to create incredible tools. So again, here might be, there's a hole here obviously because there's no hair. So if I pull that and I misjudge it even a tiny bit, this may be an area where I get a hole. So let's take a little bit off first. Gently, not using any particular tension, coming in. So cutting a little bit free form first, and then I can always tighten up the shape as we go. I think here I can start to use some elevation, making sure, holding in the fingers, we'll let that even drop out for a moment. Holding in the fingers and coming through.
Linda is saying hello from New York and was wondering, did you originally train at Vidal Sassoon?
I sure did. I spent the first 10 years of my career at Vidal Sassoon. I started in New York City as an apprentice in 1993 and worked as a stylist there at the GM building on Fifth Avenue, and then moved out to Santa Monica to work in the academy in the mid-90s. And my Sassoon journey was a wonderful experience. I left in about the year 2000, opened my first salon, and then continued to grow my career and my experience working with incredible companies. And you know, nowadays I get to work with so many incredible brands like Pivot Point, Goldwell, very lucky. So again, just be really cautious in this area. I'll be able to control and add more graduation, but if I get a hole or I lose something, you can't put it back. So cautious, using some free form in some areas. Back here, I know I'm good. This is probably one of the densest areas on a lot of people's head as you move into the occipital bone. So elevating and working to the center. Tension is even, and constantly looking at the shape. You know, I know you're on a kind of a corner there, but we're looking at how that's building, how it's coming around into here. Okay, continuing through. Now, I'm going to change my sectioning in a minute. I've got one more section that I want to come to right about the top of the occipital bone. And then I'm going to change my sectioning so that I can extend the graduation. I'm going to feel, okay, confident that I've got enough weight built in my outline, and then it'll all be about extending. I feel confident here that I can start to hold in my fingers a little bit as well. Maybe I'll just use a little less tension and also do a little pointing in that area. But then here, feeling very confident, elevating and working my way through. Super comfortable with the anatomical grip. That's why these are called the HB Pro AG. You get a good shot of that. It's designed to work in any position, horizontal cutting, diagonal cutting, vertical cutting for extreme comfort without any kind of gimmicky handle. This type of anatomical grip has been around for a very long time. And honestly, I don't think you need anything more than that to be comfortable. You can see it's a great tool. A little checking visually, don't overdo it. Okay, now as promised, we're going to change section angle. And the reason being, this area of the head really starts to change its shape, right? It's curving away. If I keep cutting this way, it's just going to look like one length with maybe a little bit of lightness to it. What I want to do is come back to my last section behind the ear, which was almost vertical here. And I want to start to use a few hand positions to really extend this graduation. So we'll split it in half, about the round of the head. We'll check what's already been, I don't think anything's going to come off in this section yet. I'm just checking what's already been cut. And I'm going to start to use an over the hand position through the top, so that I can elevate this and continue to extend it. Now those sections are going to start to pivot around. So this is kind of like a third sectioning pattern within the shape. And you know, each one has a reason. Each one has a reason. Obviously you can combine and check in different ways. Sectioning off right at the round of the head. Checking the graduation here, you can start to see some hairs being added in. Cutting inside the hand will help me keep that base. And then beginning to cut over the hand will help me extend that graduation further into the head shape. I don't want to bring it all down there and just be external. I want to extend it, as you can see here. And in some cases, you might want to round it through. I'm not going to, because I think it can be really cool and dramatic on curly hair, and it gives you some really fun refining options that you can do as the hair starts to dry. Pivoting off the crown. My section is going to start to curve in so that I can access this graduation here. Now again, we've been very careful in this area. We don't want to change anything here. I might even freehand another piece right there. And if I do lift this area up in my hands, I'll be sure not to change anything dramatically. Just nip. Nothing really should be coming off here. I can check into this lower area, adding a little bit of pointing. No severe line. We want to let this hair wiggle and do its thing. Then we want to get above the round of the head. Switch body position, stand behind. Take a little bit of that hair out of the way. And extend.
Gerard, where did you originally train for hair cutting?
Vidal Sassoon. Worked at Vidal Sassoon for the first 10 years of my career. Started as an apprentice. And this was, you know, one of the techniques that we learned. Definitely what was called like an inside-out graduation. And we also learned how to work on curly, textured hair and permed hair in a specific way. We did do dry cutting, but, you know, the thing was you had to kind of master technical cutting first before you could get abstract. So we did this type of cutting on curly hair, or even sometimes simpler than this, but just understanding different textures of hair. I have to say, throughout my whole career, the most diverse clientele and the most diverse training that I experienced was at Sassoon. We definitely had many textures of hair, type 1s all the way through type 4s. I learned how to work with relaxed hair, permed hair. It was a beautiful time, and I'm very grateful for it. And again, you know, I think everyone always thinks of Sassoon as being like, you know, extremely technical on wet hair, but we learned dry cutting as well. So, you know, here on this beautiful Erica mannequin, so this is one of the, you know, most cost-effective and useful mannequins for hair cutting, I think, that Pivot Point makes. We go through literally dozens of them, and it's frequently on sale and has like a good price point. There's a few things I love about it. Number one, the head shape is really like a true head shape, and great hair cutting is about understanding head shape. You know, so if you get a mannequin that maybe is cheaper and has like a weird wonky head shape, right off the bat, I mean, it's going to make it really difficult to take that lesson into the salon. Second, of course, is the hair quality. So this hair quality is so good that it was able to be permed. So this is a perm that you're looking at here on Erica. We wanted to work with more textured curly hair and also just show the diversity that a great mannequin, these can be colored, they can be permed. This one was permed by our friend
Shraddha,
who works at Tony and Guy as an educator. And you can see it's beautiful. Look at that bustle. Beautiful, beautiful perm. And Kelly can copy in all the information of what she used. I believe it was an Optimum perm.
Quantum, I believe.
Quantum perm.
Extra firm solution. And yes, I will add the photo of her.
Yeah, and you know, I think hopefully with her busy schedule, we can get her to do a live here and also, you know, show beautiful perming because you know, again, I think a lot of us are like maybe scared. We haven't seen it. I'm fortunate because I saw it a lot in the beginning of my career, and I saw a lot of people making great money doing it. So I do think we're at a point now where people are open. But you know, what are the things that are important? Number one, it can't stink. I know that that sounds weird, but the biggest challenge with perms is this actually smells great. It smells wonderful. But the biggest challenge with perms back in the day was it was a kind of a stinky process. And I also think they have to be damage free. Now again, this hair to me, and we'll see as it dries, I think is definitely in great, healthy condition. And then we can start offering, so, you know, texture. Maybe you don't like the word perm. Maybe you call it texture services, waving services, whatever works for you. But I definitely know there's a market for it because guess what? One of the hottest selling things is curling irons. So people are always trying to curl their hair. You know, if you can get your sales together and explain how you can do that for them, you've opened up a whole new service.
Kathy has a great comment. Smells like money to me.
Yeah, true. But also, I mean, this is one of the biggest complaints from the old days. You know, the salon would stink. Hairdressers, if you were, you know, someone doing perms all day, you know, you definitely, when you were able to make money doing other things, it didn't smell. But I think, you know, they've really cured that problem. Look at that shape. Come around all the way, Kellen, you can see. Again, the whole thing is, watch my fingers. It went like this, and then literally up into here, just with a little action here to get this graduation in. I don't want to overly freehand it yet because I want to let this hair dry off as I work the second side. But you can see now I start to do, you know, rather than cut the whole shape like this, which you definitely can, I like to do a combination. Okay, if you missed that, good news, you can see it on this side. First thing, make sure the hair is consistently damp. Use a wider tooth comb so you don't overly stretch that hair at first, you know, especially in the areas that are dry. Use a little bit of a curl serum, hydrating serum. This one from our friends at Goldwell. From this line is fantastic. Don't you love it, Kel?
I do. Stop using it so much.
Yeah.
I want it for my hair.
Kelly's got beautiful natural curly hair and she's kind of addicted to this. You know, while we're on this, we were talking about the quality of the mannequin. I always love to, when I do things representing Pivot Point, talk to people about the way that Pivot Point operates. You know, meaning they are what's deemed an ethical company. So they've got a global certification that they pay a fair living wage in some of these third world countries where perhaps people could be taken advantage of, or essentially, you know, use child labor or all these terrible things. Pivot Point has a global certification that they don't do that. It's called an SA 8000, and it's printed on every label. You know those labels that you throw out around the neck? Take a minute to read it next time and you'll see. Or you can go to Pivot Point Shop and check out their video where they explain what that means, and they actually interview people in a factory in China who say that, you know, because of working with Pivot Point, they're able to send their children to college. They've been able to change the whole life and upgrade. And, you know, that's the world we live in now. It's not just about, you know, you can get the cheapest mannequin in the world, but you want to know where it came from and who made it, you know, depending on a lot of things. So first section here, working diagonally behind the ear, freehanding in the line. Why am I doing that? Because this area is very gentle, very tender, so to speak. I could lose the whole shape right here. So even on straight hair, lots of times I'll work more cautiously here. In this case, I'm working just kind of free form, letting that hair fall right into this place. I can always take hair away, but I can't put it back. So I can always put tension on this. I can always put elevation. I can always add graduation. And the beauty of this approach is that it does that as you work. But right here I'm safe. So I've got a beautiful line coming through. Now I can begin to start to stretch it and check it, but that'll happen naturally as I move up. Sections, this is my second section pattern, and then there'll be a third one for the crown. So I do feel at this point, here in the center for sure, I can use a little bit of tension and a little bit of elevation. I'm going to turn this way because you guys will get a better angle. Rotating in just that little tiny bit like we have been from the beginning. Going to be real careful here. You know, it's another great thing. Sometimes on a cheaper mannequin, you'll see the space behind the ears about this big. This is very realistic. You know, I'd say for me, one of the good things that's come out of the pandemic is that because there's been so much education happening on social media and on the internet, that people have begun to really understand how important great mannequins are and how great they are for lessons. I come from a background where people would say, oh, you could never learn on a mannequin. And I'm so glad that I found out that that wasn't true. I've literally taught tens of thousands, perhaps even millions if you include all these Facebook Lives, on mannequins. Now, the great thing here, and that's why we call this series Professionals Who Practice, like, you know, I can't tell you the last time I cut a perm, and, you know, it was actually Kelly's idea, you know, because we're always trying different things on this series, because that's what it's about. It's about professionals who still want to keep practicing, trying new things, or trying things they haven't done in a long time. You know, we get to practice this first, and now, as I'm doing it, I'm like, I can't wait to team up with some texture experts and do some fun perm and cut work, or texture enhancement and cut work. And that's what it's all about. It's what keeps you young in this craft. So again, looking to see that I'm getting the bustle, making sure I'm not getting a hole. If anything, I've got a little extra here. I don't need to attack it yet, but I've got a little extra, which is never a problem. Now that I've gotten above the occipital bone, I can switch my section angle to my third and final sections, which are more vertical and pivoting. I'm going to lower. Now the stands are important too. This is Pivot Point's top of the line kind of Cadillac. It's called the Pivot Point Universal Stand. And again, I see a lot of cheap stands. People go out and buy the $20 stand on Amazon, and it doesn't even make it through one class. It's worth the investment. It's an investment in your craft, in your career. I've had some of these Pivot Point mannequins for over a decade. Actually, my oldest one is probably 20 years old, and I still use it. It still works great. Every once in a while, if a little piece breaks, you can get a replacement knob. But you know, cheap doesn't really work. It doesn't last. Okay, so you can see the sectioning now, curving around into the back. In the lower area, checking inside the hand. You know, in this area, if I want to be especially gentle, I can even tap. See, I've released the tension there because I know some of that hair is going to fall behind the ear. I can make sure it drops out and I can visually see that I'm okay. And now I want to keep extending. You know, this is the lighter side of the parting, but I do want to make sure that I come overhand on the top here to extend this graduation. And I can look at my balance from here to here as the top of my graduation on both sides. And I want to see where it falls. So you can see that shot. They're actually, if they come together, they're very different because this has a side parting. Let me turn them around this way. So side parting, which I think really makes this even more dramatic, could be done with a metal parting and then this wouldn't be an issue. But you can see this is actually longer. It's got a further distance to travel, but they fall to the same place. That's what it's all about. Learning how to balance off of the parting. Okay, I think I just want to check through that section one more time, and then we'll complete this area, and then we'll just move into freehand shaping. A little bit of hair here, over the fingers, maintaining the angle. Pivoting off the crown. I always like to think of these like orange peels. You don't want them just totally vertical, you want them to curve, or sometimes people say like a beach ball. Inside the hand in the lower area. I think I'm safe now. I'm far enough away from the back of the ear that this shouldn't affect it. Inside the hand here. And just like anything, the angle of your fingers, the amount of elevation, that can vary depending on the shape that you want to create. Flatter or heavier, really up to your eye and what you think is going to look best. Why do I go over the fingers here? It helps me to elevate and extend the angle. If I kept it all down, we'd start to see too much weight for the desired look that I want. But don't get carried away with that freehand at this stage. I mean, I probably could just come in here and freehand the rest off. And I love that kind of cutting. But, I want there to be a certain distinction and sharpness to the shape before I start to do any kind of detailing and softening. Again, consistency, putting consistency into it. Coming through. Even tension from roots to ends. Comb makes a big difference there. I'm not pulling the hair. I've got a firm grip on it, but I'm not stretching it as I cut it. The comb stretches it evenly. My hand could never stretch it evenly on every section. So I really need to rely on the comb, the fine teeth of the comb. In this case, even tension. My fingers just grab it and lock it and cut. So the tension is this way, but I'm not pulling. You don't want to see that scalp moving or being pulled. Comb does all the work. So combs are so important. Really thinking about the comb you're going to use. Here you can see it's starting to come together. Beautiful. Just a few more sections. Probably 2 or 3 more at the most. I always like to pass the center to make sure we've got a perfect balance. Come around maybe this way so you guys can see a little bit better. Again, graduation happening here. Maybe the angle was better like as it was originally, Cal?
Yeah.
I'm going to lower her down just a tiny bit. Even, fine teeth of the comb right the way through. And working up into the crown. As the head starts to turn away from me, I want to work over the fingers. You can be really mindful of the head shape. Put it in a natural position here so you don't build too much weight. And continue to extend that graduation right up into the top. Now you could also round through at this point if you know you wanted a much more layered look. I would just be cutting more convex with the head shape. Okay, just about coming over the center now. Probably the last section where there'll be any substantial hair to cut. If I want to work really clean, I can panel it just with my fingers. Here's the first panel from the nape to the mid-occipital bone. Second panel to about the top of the O bone. I still want to make sure I'm building weight, staying inside the hand. Now the head's rounding away from me. I want to extend the weight or remove the weight if I wanted to layer through more. But in this case, I really want to extend the weight and push the graduation more internal and higher. The mannequin gets a little bit denser in the crown, which is a nice feature because it's, gives you more hair to work with there. So here you'll notice I have switched to the wide side of the comb just because I want to be a little more gentle. Probably nothing substantial left to cut, but I am going to pass into the opposite side here. And you can see blending all the way through. Now, rather than doing a very technical cross-check here, I'm going to do that more visually at this stage. Okay, so I've let the hair dry naturally. It's not completely dry, and I'll probably put a diffuser on it, but that's not very fun to watch. So we're going to do some of the refining now. I'm going to get in here. I usually put my comb down at this point and really start to expand that hair. Let that shape come out. See how much it's going to shrink up. You know, you could obviously completely dry it. My favorite thing really would be at this point to put her under like a heat lamp just for a few minutes. But in this case, we'll work with the hair slightly damp so you don't have to listen to a few minutes of blow drying, but you can start to see the expansion now. Now I don't pull on the curl at this stage. The shape's in there, it's been pulled on enough. Now I want to see what happens when you don't pull on it and you really want to customize it. Working this quadrant here behind the ear.
What are you looking for as you're freehanding right now?
Irregularities, like look, you know, see the one side to the other? It's very subtle, but there's some like little irregularities there where that's more defined. This is about stopping every 30 seconds or so, looking in the mirror, and just, you know, I always like if a curl is zigging and not zagging, this is when I kind of tame that in the pattern. Because some curls are going to go to the left and some are going to go to the right. And we're just trying to tame that. It will change from day to day. That's the beauty of curly hair. If you want it to look exactly the same, well then blow dry it straight and flat iron it every day. But we don't want to do that. We want to embrace the individuality. I always try to pull away as I cut with this so I don't make any distinct cutting marks. So I'm actually closing, here I'll do it a little bit slower as opposed to closing on the way in. I find it makes it a bit softer. Clip this back a little bit where it's going to be worn. And again. And just like anything, it's usually the underneath stuff closer to the hairline that needs the most attention because it's closer to the hairline. It's going to wiggle around a bit more. And this hair here at the front is much more one length. So since it's a little heavier, I want to work on the top a little bit more. Very visual. I'd be stopping, looking in the mirror, constantly, you know, if you just keep cutting for 10 minutes, you're going to take too much away. You have to be really, really gentle and visual. So like that, and stop, and maybe check with the scissor in another angle. Turn around, look in the mirror. Just little curls that are out of the pattern that I'm trying to create. And it really should be dust. I mean, look at what's on my scissors here. Every once in a while, you might cut about this much. But if you've gone through the whole technique like I've done here and you have to cut a lot more off, something was wrong. Really refining. Now, if I felt like I wanted, I really like this shape, but if I did want to make this a little lighter, I could take some of these top pieces and maybe we'll just do it in the center back to add some drama. And I can do a little back cutting. I can come in even a little bit more dramatic and kind of cut it from the top like this. If I want to make a little bit more drama, I could do that everywhere. You know, this is really, if you've got a good shape and it's balanced, oh man, you can do anything to the texture. So maybe just in the center there, taking a little bit more off.
Is that why you chose to cut it this time wet versus dry? Is to put in a very
that's exactly why.
structured
now, I
shape?
love dry cutting, and you know, to be honest, you know, this could have obviously been cut beautifully, totally dry. I think there's a beautiful movement of people cutting hair that way. But I don't want the concept of being able to cut beautiful. You can cut curly permed hair when it's wet, especially if you want more geometry in the haircut, and then you want to soften it. If you want the hair to be more organic and then maybe strengthen it towards the end, then I'd probably do it completely dry. But, you know, me, I think all forms of, as long as it looks great, I want to know. I want to know how to do it. I want to practice and play. But I think when, you know, if ever you think, oh, this is the only way to do it, or this is always the best way to do it, you're limiting yourself. And I see that happen a lot, unfortunately, in our industry. Never use a razor. Always use a scissor. Always cut wet. Always cut dry. Never use a round brush. Always use a round brush. You know, just everything can be done well if you're a craftsman, craftsperson, if you've got great technique. Okay, we're going to try a little bit of we're going to stick with the curl and waves line. This is the lightweight wave fluid. We're just going to push that in. And then I'll just maybe use my diffuser for a few seconds to kind of bring this out. Really just kind of pushing that into the hair. Grabbing it like I'm grabbing a ball. And really pushing it in. You know, the other thing that, you know, it's interesting if you've been doing hair like I have close to 30 years, you will actually remember that people got perms to blow their hair out, which I know sounds a little bit weird, but to be honest, it can, if it's done well and the protection and the hair is kept healthy, it can be a great way to make hair that's not very easy to styleable. You know, if that hair is really straight or really kind of just willful, sometimes a great perm can change that and make the hair so much more styleable. Like if I did want to blow this out, I could do anything to it. I could blow it into all kinds of shapes because, you know, the texture's been manipulated. You know, and just like everything, if that's done with skill, it's a great thing. If it's done poorly, then it's a bad thing. Love what that lotion did. It just put the moisture right back into the hair. And at each step, I do just a little bit of refining.
Kathy's mentioning she's done hundreds, maybe thousands of perms in the 80s.
Mm-hmm. I'll bet. Wouldn't you love to have that source of revenue back into the salon? You know, I think obviously we went very, very color-centric. And at a certain point, perm and color didn't work together very well. But I know the technology of both products has gotten so much better. That there's so much more option, you know? And again, this is a perm that's naturally dried. But again, I could, compared to what Erica's texture is without a perm, I could so easily style this in so many different ways with a brush, with an iron. In this case, I'm just gonna work with my Dyson diffuser, some downward heat. And I'm not gonna make you watch the whole thing because I'll be here just for a few minutes and ultimately it's gonna look just like this but dry. So I'll just dry off one little area so you can really see the quality of the perm. And shout out to Shraddha, who did this beautiful perm. I mean, look at that.
She did an incredible job. Thank you, Shraddha.
Yeah, we're gonna definitely work together more. I'd love to continue to play around with this idea. But again, look at that. Look at the curl there. All right, guys, I want to thank you. I want to thank our friends at Pivot Point for their continued support and you know, for being the great ethical company they are and really believing in education, creating great tools for educators, supporting cosmetology schools all over the world. And I want to thank you guys for your continued support of Hairbrain. I hope you guys enjoyed today's lesson. I'll be back next week. I'm going to come to you every Wednesday to keep sharing. And of course, we've got tons of other Facebook Lives and Instagram Lives. If you're not on our mailing list, head to hairbrain.me now and become a member. It's totally free. And then you'll start to get our emails of everything that's happening in the Hairbrain world.
We have tons of sales on our Pro Shop all the time.
Yep, absolutely. All right, I'm just going to kind of lightly dry her with this downward air using my Dyson diffuser. Peace out, guys. Thanks for joining me.